He's John Timpane.
And he's Don Rooney.
And this is
The Musical Innertube.
Now, you may ask, why is this podcast called The Musical Innertube?
And we may reply, because that's its name, of course.
Now, how did this podcast get that name?
Back in college, we hosted a radio show. Once, we tried to introduce a soothing musical interlude.
Instead, we messed up and wound up introducing a soothing musical innertube, and the name stuck.
So here we are, hundreds of years later, still talking
to interesting people about their interesting lives.
Difference makers who really make a difference.
The Musical Innertube is very happy to welcome Isaac Klein, proprietor of the podcast Vanity. This is a podcast, folks, on the kind of topic podcasts should be about. Vanity plates. If you've ever seen a vanity plate and wondered, gosh, what does that mean? Then this podcast is for you. Every episode tells a story behind a different vanity license plate. And in fact, Isaac finds the people who have license plates and brings them on his podcast to tell us the whole story. It is such a great idea. And we also hear that Isaac is a big punster, so I'm inclined to welcome Isaac to the Musical Innertube. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
So Isaac, this grew out of a project in college during your senior year. Is that correct?
That's right. So I just wrapped up my master's a couple of months ago in media and communication at UNC Chapel Hill.
Congrats.
And thank you very much. And I was thinking about what might make an interesting thesis project. And before that, I was just trying to think of audio stories for class for the one of the university radio programs called Carolina Connection. And was driving around with my wife and doing, as you said, and what many people like to do when you're driving around, spotting vanity plates and trying to figure out what they mean. And I thought, that could make an interesting little story. And then pretty soon after that, I thought, that's more than just a little story. Could be a whole series of them. And that's where it began.
I have to tell you, Isaac, when I first heard of the concept of this, the first thing that flashed into my mind was a personal story. My father-in-law lived up in New Hampshire, and he got a license plate. The vanity plate said "one mo time," T-Y-M. And I guess he wanted to make it say "one more time." But if you read it backwards, it's "my Tom number one," and one of his kids is named Tom. So all of his other kids were giving him, including my wife, were giving him hell about, hey, how come he got on your license plate and we didn't? And so when I heard some of your podcasts and stories, some of which are not quite so hilariously wonderful, it did occur to me that behind every one of those vanity plates is some sort of story, whether it be funny or whether it be a little tragic.
It's so true. I was really surprised and delighted by that even people who would say to me when I started talking to them, there's not really much of a story to my plate. And getting to know them, more often than not, there was really something substantial there that went in a lot of directions that I could not have predicted beforehand.
One of the ironies about vanity plates, which of course are ubiquitous now, right? I mean, some days I feel they're more vanity plates than the non-vanity, whatever you call the kind that are not vanity. You see them so often. But one of the ironies is that much as with Don's relative there, this is a very personal statement. It's telling the world something that the world probably can't quite figure out. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Some of them are messages that feel you really would have to talk to the person to get to the bottom of it. And some of them at least seem straightforward, like you could guess what it is, but there's always something more personal to the story, I find.
And is there one, I'm really interested in this. How do you find the people? How do you get them to talk to you? Tell us that.
Yeah, so I think we're the project to really expand. I think there's plenty of ways to do it online, right? To solicit people's plates and plates that they've seen and track them down that way. But as I was starting work on it here in North Carolina, I wanted to just try to make it more organic and grassroots and shoe leather here. And so when I saw an interesting plate on a car that was parked, I made up these flyers and I would just leave one on the windshield. And I also had some friends and family doing that in various places. When they saw an interesting plate, they would leave a flyer when the owner returned. And once they allowed the panic to dissipate that it was a parking ticket, they would pick, some of them would get back to me.
That's good.
Now, how many, in relation to how many flyers you put out, how many people responded? What percentage of people got back to you?
I would say it was about a third, which I was really happy with. That was more than I thought for a stranger saying, hey, I want to talk to you about your vanity plate. But I think there's something about a vanity plate. It's something so public facing that I think the person is often inclined to want to talk about it. Otherwise, they wouldn't put it in so public a place.
That is such an interesting thought. Of course. I mean, why did they go to this trouble of creating this message that is a little bit gnomic, right? You know, you might not be able to penetrate the message unless you knew the person and knew the story. Why would they go to that trouble if they really had nothing to say about it?
It's kind of like those buttons or T-shirts that say, ask me about blank.
Exactly. Or, you know, it's like somebody handing out flyers on the sidewalk that, you know, or something that they want you to attend, some speech or lecture or something like that. Let me ask you about some of these stories that you've uncovered. Some of these people have had interesting lives or interesting things that led them to the vanity plate. What surprised you about these people's stories when you started talking to them?
You mean about a specific one or just
well,
generally?
Yeah. I mean, if one of them stands out, that would be a good one to start with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pausing, I think, because I don't want to give too much away. I want to encourage people to perhaps go listen to them after this. But yeah, I mean, I guess one thing that's probably true of all of them, whether or not the person is aware of it, is it's in that small collection of letters and symbols, in that message to the world that they put there. There's something more fundamentally about who they are that they are choosing to share, that they are saying, this is something about me that I really want people around me to know as they're speeding by. If they catch one thing about me, it's this notion, it's this idea. So it's something they really identify with on a deep level, even if they say that it's just a joke or something they thought of off the cuff. It starts to become part of how they identify in the world.
What's the weirdest one that you've come up with so far?
I mean, I love Miyandoko because I had no idea what it meant until I talked to the person. And as you guys heard, each episode starts with people guessing, trying to guess what each plate means, as we all like to do. And that was the one that nobody could make heads or tails of it. And you would have to have some very specialized knowledge to figure out what it actually meant without talking to the owner of the car.
And and what was that? Yeah, you should tell our listeners.
Oh, should we give them a little spoiler on that one?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, so Miyandoko is a specific, it's not in the dictionary of Swahili, but it's Swahili slang used in an area of Kenya that essentially means road trip.
And how is a person even? I mean, that's already very interesting. I mean, the person obviously knows some Swahili slang, don't we all? But seriously,
of course,
yes. But that's so crazy. It's so recherché. It's so really way out there. I just love that. And did you find that had? And I know the answers to this, but I just thought I'd tease it out. So what in that person's background led them to go to the trouble to make a vanity plate about it?
Yeah, so David, the star of that story, is from Nairobi in Kenya. And ever since he was a little boy, he just absolutely loved to be out on the road and traveling. And it's something he inherited from his father. And he was always so excited to do that. And he spent 10 years of his life as a professional truck driver here in America and really got to know the country that way. And you hear a lot of stories about how difficult that can be for people who are out there doing that work. And talking to David, it just sounds like he had this marvelous time and loved doing it and continued that kind of passionate road trip spirit through that work. And And now he has this vehicle that he and his wife and son pretty much exclusively use for their road trip excursions when they have time to go out and travel and enjoy life together in that way. And when they were getting that car, it was his wife who says, well, you should really put Miondoko on the car because that is the spirit of the vehicle that we will be going forth with it.
Yeah, there you go. Let me ask you then, when you started putting these together for your thesis and for your college radio, how did it go over? Was it well liked? Was it well received?
Yeah, I mean, I will say the college radio show, it was a bit more of a news program, and those stories wanted to be in the neighborhood of 3 minutes. So I ended up shelving this idea and not pursuing it for the radio show. Then I started talking to professors about the notion of bringing it to life for a thesis project. And I wasn't sure that it would be the right fit for the program. But everyone I talked to about it was really excited about it and thought it was a really fun idea. And I loved it because it allowed me to do the kind of storytelling that I most enjoy, where hopefully you really get to know someone in a personal way and really get to hear and appreciate that individual story, which I think everybody has an interesting story if you can work with them to find a fun way to tell it. And so it was really just in the last few months that I wrapped up the project and was reviewing drafts with various friends and mentors and colleagues. But just in the last month or so, a little more than that it's been up on all the platforms and public for everyone to enjoy. And I think the response has been great. The only feedback I have heard is very positive. If anyone hated it, they have elected to not share that with me.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, so much unlike it's so much unlike our own experience.
Yeah. You don't want to get involved with the trolls, believe me.
Yeah, I'll let them be for now.
Yeah. Well, so do you see a future in this? This is something you did for your thesis, and you have about a half a dozen down. But are you continuing this? Is Vanity going to be an ongoing podcast?
I would love to make more episodes of Vanity. Where I am at the moment, creating that initial batch was part of my school experience, and it was also something that I had a lot of passion for doing. Each one, from beginning to end, from finding the person and then gathering all the different types of sound and doing all that editing and producing, it would take me weeks to make each episode if I were to continue. And I think to really keep that moving, I would probably need some kind of production team or company to want to pick it up. And having since graduated, I'm looking more at finding work. And actually, I've found a job I'm excited about. I'm going to be starting with PBS North Carolina at the end of this month.
Oh, congratulations. That's great.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I think that will kind of get my focus, at least for the immediate time being. But I would love to find a way to have that be part of my career as it expands and take the idea further. And I think there's great potential, right, for just looking nationally, or if there is any more specific geographic market that wanted stories about the people within that community who have vanity plates. I think it's really customizable, localizable. Would be thrilled to see where it goes. And I had a really gratifying and joyful and fulfilling experience creating these episodes. So I would love to have a chance to do more, but I think it might be a little while until that moment arrives.
I could say that podcasts often, sort of stutter into, existence. You do a few, you sort of get better at doing a few, you look for funding, right? And suddenly something happens and they just start to purr, but it's usually the case that the people whose podcasts last the longest, it seems to me anyway, are the most industrious in beating the bushes, getting funding, getting some commercials on there, getting an audience, so it does have a claim on your time.
Yeah. And John, we should look for funding. Make a note of that.
Okay. Yes. I'm getting my crayon out. Look for, how do you make a $? Dollars?
Yeah. There you go. Go ahead. I do think though that I'm glad that you're affiliated with PBS in North Carolina, Isaac, because I think in listening to them, there is a very NPR PBS sort of blend to the show.
Yeah, I'll say.
And I think that that's something that that particular outlet would be able to use, whether it's in video or audio form. I mean, that's kind of the thing that NPR and PBS does right now, is explore these little stories that mean a lot.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I would be very pleased if they wanted to talk to me about continuing Vanity.
Did you get inspiration from listening to things like This American Life and that sort of thing?
I really did. I mean, that's the one. That's the gold standard, right? I mean, This American Life, I imagine a lot of your listeners are familiar with that program, the Hourglass Hourly program that you, just as the title suggests, you get to hear these amazingly varied and rich stories of people living this American life and that within any state and certainly within the whole country, there's just such an incredible amount of variety of human experience that whoever you are, you can hear someone's perspective that's completely different from yours, and ideally have your mind and heart expanded by listening to that other person's perspective.
We'll be back to our podcast in just a moment, but first, here's a soothing musical interlude.
Isaac Klein is an audio journalist, writer, director, teacher, and performer, born and raised in East Hampton, New York. In May 2022, he graduated from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill with an MA in Media and Communication. Isaac is the author of the book, The School of Doing, Lessons from Theater Master Gerald Friedman.
His work has been seen in theaters all around the country, perhaps most notably as assistant director of the Broadway revivals of Gypsy and West Side Story. Isaac is a company member at Exit, Pursued by a Bear. He has a BFA in drama from the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, where he has often returned as a guest teacher and artist. He lives in Chapel Hill with his wife Laura and their dog Cricket.
And now, back to the musical Innertube.
Already in progress.
I'm thinking about something as I'm listening to you. So are most of the people that you've been talking to, are they from the North Carolina area? Or have you had people farther afield in the United States?
Yeah. So there are 3 North Carolina plates, and there's a New York plate and a California plate. And the people involved are from even wider geographic regions. You know, I have David, who's from Nairobi.
Right.
So I think it's from California to Nairobi and as I was thinking about people to talk with, you know, I did 19 initial interviews, kind of like the way that we're talking, where it was mostly remote, and I recorded those conversations, and then I pared it down to 5 that I thought had the most variety and diversity of perspective and identity, and geographic location was one of the things I thought of. I didn't want that to be homogenous.
You know, it's funny because this is part of a very, we everybody knows about this, I think, who drives a car, but your car becomes sort of a person in your life. You know, if your car doesn't work, you get mad at it, you know, which is ridiculous. I mean, it's just a machine. It's not doing this on purpose, but people do get mad at their cars, or they're very affectionate about their cars. And as Don knows, I mean, the insides of people's cars really say a lot about them. I don't mean just the smells.
Thank you, John.
Yeah. Yes.
Somebody roll the window down.
That's right. Yeah. But I mean, you know, people have...
And throw John out of it. No, go.
No, everything. Right? But, you know, from everything from fuzzy dice to the bobblehead dolls in the back, the back window to, even air fresheners and all this stuff, people start, making their cars home, right? There's a sort of a concentrated idiosyncrasy to this whole world, which, first of all, I think everybody knows about, right? Everybody lives in that world. Not everybody, but people who drive do, right? I drive more hours than I want to say I do. And because I live in New Jersey. But we used to, when we lived in California, right, Don? I mean, that's what we did all day, basically.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Everybody lived a half hour apart. And not only to John's point of people making cars their home, but also to your point earlier, Isaac, about people making cars their billboard. It's a home away from home, but it's also something that expresses or they want it to express their personality. How difficult was it to get these people to open up a little bit and give you more of a story, more of an in-depth story than just, I thought it was a funny way to say road trip or whatever,
Right.
Yeah, every once in a while I would talk to someone who was a little reticent. But for the most part, I think once we'd gotten past the step of them deciding to reach out to me and be willing to talk with me, and then once we kind of logged on together and we're holding a space together online or on the phone or sometimes in person, people were more often than not very happy and willing to share their stories. And I think the majority of folks were like, I'm not sure how much is here, how much I really have to say. I think we all can feel that way, right? Like, am I enough? Is my story really interesting? But I think that I'm relatively good at asking people questions and helping them feel comfortable and listening for things I can help to draw out if I ask them follow-up things. And that's a lot of what I have practiced in my earlier work in theater and what I was learning about and refining in grad school. And it's fun and exciting to get to know that people in that way. And I think more often than not, I was able to work with them to elicit something really interesting.
So we should, I think, make the point that Isaac is related to someone who has been a guest recently on the musical Innertube, Dava Sobel. And the first thing she told me about you, Isaac, is that you were a big punster, that you love puns. And I'm wondering where you picked that up. I mean, I love them too, and so does Don.
Yeah.
But were you always a punster? Were you one of these little kids who made puns on every other word like I was? Or how did you come to that?
Yeah, but also definitely answer that. And what I also just want to mention about my mom is, as I think you two know, if your listeners heard that episode and choose to listen to Vanity, they might hear her show up at a certain time.
Right. She's been a guest on both of our podcasts.
She has the unique distinction.
Yes.
I guess in addition to me, technically.
Yes,
she's quite the media personality. Quite the media personality.
She really is. I've got a pretty fancy mom there, guys. But yeah, I have been a lifetime lover of language and words, and I think verbally is like the primary way that I process things. Both of my parents have mentioned to me that before I even had language, I was born just sort of talking and making sounds. And my dad was also a writer, and as I was being playful with language and thinking of things, they would both encourage me to go write it down and think about that or go look it up, as the case was. Really, I think it's something I've always loved to do, and I try to temper it now so that I don't get kicked out of places. But I was always
Yes.
always kind of a smart ass, and wanting to jump in with the joke or the twist on the thing that was happening, and was thrilled to find an outlet where people wanted to scream and cheer and give prizes for puns and not just roll their eyes and tolerate them.
Again, getting back to my in-laws, my brother's-in-laws' famous words to me were always, save it for the radio, Don. So, yeah.
People put puns down. You're not supposed to like that kind of humor. There's a certain number of people out there who will wrinkle their nose and goes, oh, okay, that's a pun, but I just love them. I think they're really funny. There's almost sort of a mystical energy that's released when you tweak a word just a little bit and suddenly it means all these other things. You fool around with words, you put them in different contexts, and suddenly they're doing all this new work. It's not that far away. I mean, it's not the same thing as poetry, but it certainly does harness the same kind of attention to language.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's puns in poetry, and there's poetry in puns.
That's great. Have you learned any new ones lately, or made up any new ones?
If you want to give me a topic, we can see what happens.
Okay. How about food? How about Italian food? We could start with any. We can go spaghetti and meatballs. We can go mozzarella cheese, sausages.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of one right away, so I might have to pasta Mike to one of you. I hope I'll get a lot of enthusiasm and not a bolognese in response.
Oh, that's wonderful. See, I love stuff like that. I love stuff like this. Yeah.
I mean, people might have a nice response when this kind of humor lays on you.
This is a man after my own heart. But see, when you start doing these kinds of puns, this chain punning, it's almost like you have to ransack your memory. You have to look at all the different funny words that are in this one field, right? Because that's what you asked me for, was to pick a field. So we're in the field, and then you've got to tweak the words. I mean, your mind is operating at a pretty good rate of speed there.
It is, yeah. And, I think it's just something I enjoy doing, and there's plenty of things that I am terrible at, and this is just an area where I think I have a natural sort of aptitude that I have trouble turning off, that I'm always playing with language and thinking of the rhyme and thinking of what I can do with it. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that a lot of this that I've been doing in that place where people are cheering and giving out prizes is this competition based in Brooklyn called Punderdome that I've enjoyed attending many times, and would encourage your Northeastern listeners to check out if they enjoy this kind of thing. And that's been I've made great friends there, and that's been a wonderful home to get up in front of a crowd and try to make dumb jokes like this.
I've heard of Punderdome. Is that broadcast?
There is some stuff online, and during the pandemic, they were holding their events on Zoom, but they are most often not broadcast and live at Littlefield in Gowanus in Brooklyn, or maybe it's Park Slope, but right around there.
I mean, I have to make the obvious point that a lot of vanity plates are puns, aren't they? They misspell a word to mean another word, right?
Right, because the exact word they wanted was too long, or it was taken by someone else, and so those with can spur that sort of creativity.
Let me ask you about the evolution of your snappy little brain there. With parents who are writers, writing is a very, I want to say, solitary thing to do. You kind of turn it in and roll things over in your mind, and it comes out on the paper. You seem to have turned that around a little bit. You like to come out with things. When things come into your brain, they go out the other way.
You caught me.
Seriously, what turned you around from being an introspective writer to being somebody who likes to come out with your pronouncements and other things?
Oh, well, I think they developed simultaneously, and probably the loudmouth smartass cut up got a head start of a couple of years. That was happening before I knew how to read or write, I think. And so, I always loved performing. I was always on stage. I was cutting up in class at times to excess, and always kind of delighted by finding ways to bring levity to myself and those around me, and playing with language live in the moment that way. I think it certainly has a lot in common with how I'll work a sentence over as I'm figuring out how to voice something that I'm writing down.
Interesting. Yeah.
But yeah, live in the moment is, I think, the predecessor to any potential talents I have in scripting things.
We've had such a great time here. We've gone from vanity plates to puns and back again, and we could do this for hours. I just think this has been one of our funniest and funnest, interviews on the musical Innertube, and we want to thank you for the Vanity podcast, Isaac Klein, and hope that you will be our guest again sometime soon.
I would love it if you guys do want to make this a trio and just joke around for a while. I'm happy to. This was a great time, and you guys always make this so fun on the podcast and bring such a light spirit to it. It's always a pleasure to listen.
Thank you. And now, shameless plug portion of our show. Isaac, where can people find Vanity?
Yeah, so it's available most places you listen to podcasts, and you can also go to my website, isaac-klein, Klein, innertube.com/vanity. If you Google my name and the podcast, it should come up easily.
Well, Abyssinia.
I think that might have gone over my virtual head.
I'll be seeing you.
But I knew what you were going for some kind of fun, and I enjoyed it just on that level.
And thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
Our lovely little podcast is available everywhere good podcasts are found. Listen on your favorite platform, and if you like what you hear, please give us a good rating.
And spread the word. Tell your friends about the Innertube and let them know they can subscribe to the podcast on our website, musicalinnertube.com.
There you can listen to all of our podcasts, see pictures and biographies of our guests, and contact us. You can even click on the microphone button in the lower right corner to leave us a voicemail.
And don't forget to leave your email address on our Talk to the Tube page so we can stay in touch.
And you can email us directly at musicalinnertube@gmail.com.
And as always, thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for our theme music.